Analysis and update on the situation in West Asia. Meanwhile, in the US, they've rolled out the red carpet for Mohammed Yunus after having snubbed Sheikh Hasina for years. We'll decode why. In Pakistan, 6 ministries and 150,000 government jobs will be cut in return for the latest IMF bailout. The UAE has accused Sudan of carrying out an airstrike on their ambassador's house. Austria is the latest European country to vote for the far right. Nepal is reeling under devastating floods, and Sweden becomes the first country in the world to give paid parental leave to grandparents. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Germany to deny citizenship to those using a specific slogan on social media. The slogan, "From the river to the sea," is associated with support for Palestine. Individuals who use, like or comment on it won't be eligible for German citizenship. The decision follows the enactment of Germany's dual citizenship law in June. Donald Trump calls Kamala Harris mentally impaired, says the US Vice President should be prosecuted and impeached. Trump had threatened his previous rivals, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, with legal action as well. The US presidential election will be held on 5th November. Polls show a very tight race between Trump and Harris. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen goes on trial. She is accused, along with others, of embezzling money from the European Parliament with fake jobs. The case could endanger Le Pen's presidential ambitions. If convicted, she could be jailed or banned from public office for a decade. Cash-strapped Sri Lanka records its first deflation in almost 3 decades. Data showed price drops in both food and non-food goods. Sri Lanka last recorded deflation in 1995. 2 years ago, inflation in the island nation had hit a record high of 69%. An Epic Games sues Google and Samsung. The Fortnite maker accuses the tech giant of illegally colluding, claims they blocked competition on Samsung devices. The new lawsuit comes amid increased scrutiny of big tech companies. Israel is bombing Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, continuing the high-intensity assault that began over the weekend. The first target was the Hezbollah chief. Israel killed him. Then they launched an all-out campaign targeting every Iranian proxy in West Asia. Let's start with Lebanon on the show, where the Hezbollah has suffered a devastating blow. Their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is dead. In fact, their top brass has been decimated because in the last 10 days, at least 7 top Hezbollah leaders have been killed. Israel claims an even higher number. It says 20 Hezbollah leaders have been neutralized. It's hard to confirm either number, but the result of these killings is undeniable. Israel has paralyzed the Hezbollah. They're at their weakest, and Israel is far from done. It is aiming for the total elimination of Hezbollah. It has intensified bombing operations in Beirut. Today, Israel struck central Beirut, targeting an apartment building. 2 floors were completely blown out. At least 3 people were killed. These were senior members of a pro-Palestine group. And this is a major escalation. This is the first time in 18 years that Israel has targeted central Beirut, the heart of Lebanon's capital. The message is quite clear. There are no limits or red lines anymore. Israel is going after all of them, wherever they are.
Our enemies, I say, we are strong and determined. To our partners, I would say, our war is your war. And to the people of Lebanon, I say, our war is not with you. It's time to change.
He may say that the war is not with the people of Lebanon, but they are paying the price for it because groups like Hamas and Hezbollah are embedded with civilians. Last week's strike hit them like a bolt of lightning, and now Nasarallah's death has sent shockwaves through the region. Many people in Lebanon could not believe it. When Israel claimed Nasrallah's death, they were in denial. They dismissed it as enemy propaganda. But on Saturday afternoon, Hezbollah issued a confirmation. They declared that Hassan Nasrallah was indeed dead. On local television, anchors broke down while sharing the news.
نالها سيد الشهداء التبريكات للتعازي باستشهاد الأمين العام لحزب الله السيد حسن نصر الله.
After that, all hell broke loose. The streets were packed with people. Many of them were in tears, but some of them were also seen celebrating. Some people fired gunshots into the sky. And this is not surprising because Hassan Nasrallah was a deeply divisive figure. To his critics, he was an Iranian proxy, but to his supporters, he was a hero, the man who drove Israel out of southern Lebanon in 2006. Shia Muslims across the world mourned his death. They took to the streets in Iran, in the West Bank, in Pakistan, even in parts of India. Why has Nasrallah evoked such a strong and widespread response? We'll discuss that in a bit, but first let's tell you how his group is faring. Hezbollah is trying to project strength, saying it is ready to fight Israel.
We will face any possible attack, and we are ready. If the Israelis decide to enter by land, the resistance forces are ready for a ground engagement. We have prepared and got ready, and with our trust in God Almighty, we are confident that the Israeli enemy will not achieve its goals, and we will emerge victorious from this battle.
Lebanon is the new battleground in West Asia. Israel has been bombing it non-stop. In the last 2 weeks, it has conducted hundreds of airstrikes, killing at least 1,000 people and displacing 1 million. The next step could be a ground offensive. Israel has deployed tanks near the border with Lebanon. It has called up its reserve forces. Israeli special forces are already on the front lines. Reports say they're launching small raids across the border. Today, the Israeli defense minister met his troops, and this is what he told them.
I am saying here to the reservists and to the regulars, everything that needs to be done, we will do. Our goal is to return the residents of the North to their homes. For the return of the residents of the North to their homes, we will be ready to make every effort. This is your mission. This is the mission of the IDF, and this is what we will do, and we will employ all that is needed. Your forces, other forces, from the air, from the sea, and also from the land.
From the air, from the sea, and from the land. Israel seems to be gearing up to hit Lebanon from all sides, and that's not all. Israel is also targeting the Houthis in Yemen. The IDF launched a series of air raids. Dozens of aircraft flew to Yemen to strike the Houthis, which is another proxy group of Iran, the Houthi group. Their power plants and seaport facilities were hit. Reports say at least 4 people are dead. And this was a retaliatory strike. Over the weekend, the Houthis launched a missile. It was aimed at Tel Aviv. The Houthis used a ballistic missile. The target was the Gurion International Airport. Israel intercepted the missile. No damage was done. The Houthis most probably knew that this would happen because this was not a serious military strike. It was more like a demonstration. They wanted to show Israel that their missiles could reach as far as Tel Aviv. Now Israel is responding in kind. It's a free-for-all.
Nasrallah was not just another terrorist, he was the terrorist.
We will face any possible attack, and we are ready.
Hassan Nasrallah was the most powerful man in Lebanon, with influence and followers beyond the country's borders. He literally had an army at his disposal and top-notch security. So how did Israel manage to kill him, and where does his death leave the Hezbollah? Let's tell you about the man first. Hassan Nasrallah was born in 1960 in eastern Beirut. It was an impoverished neighborhood. His father sold vegetables. He was the eldest of 9 children. Nasrallah was a Shia Muslim. The community had long been neglected in Lebanon. So at a young age, he was drawn to religion. In 1974, a group called Amal was formed, a Shia militia group called Amal. The very next year, Lebanon descended into a civil war and Nasrallah joined Amal. He was 15 years old. This was a brief stint in a militia. Soon he turned back to religious studies. He headed to the city of Najaf in central Iraq, where he met a cleric, a man who would impact his life deeply. This man was Ayatollah Khomeini, the first supreme leader of Iran. Nasrallah was close to Khomeini. He was inspired by him. So when he returned to Lebanon, he wanted to do what Khomeini was doing. Nasrallah joined Amal, the same Shia militia group again. But he kept wanting to do more. An opportunity came up in 1982. That's when Israel invaded Lebanon. More than 20,000 Lebanese were killed. When the assault ended, Beirut formed a unifying committee to heal the country. Amal became a part of this group. But Hassan Nasrallah and several others felt betrayed. They did not want to give in. For them, resistance was the only answer. So they left Amal. And in the same year, in 1982, they established the Hezbollah, or the Party of God. That's what the Hezbollah means. In the years that followed, Hezbollah grew rapidly. Nasrallah served as a fighter. He worked his way up the ranks. He often went to Iran to consult. And Hezbollah chose him to go to be sent to Iran because he was fluent in Persian. So Nasrallah was basically doing well for himself. But 1992 changed his life. Israel killed Abbas al-Musawi, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, and Hassan Nasrallah replaced him. He was only 32 years old and he became the Hezbollah chief at the age of 32. He transformed the Hezbollah. When he took charge, it was just a fringe group. Under him, it became a formidable force. In the year 2000, he drove Israel out of southern Lebanon. In 2006, he led the group to a deadly war with Israel. All of this gave Nasrallah a cult status, but he wasn't done. His next goal was to mainstream the Hezbollah. It was already a military force. He wanted to make it a political force too. In 2018, Hezbollah swept Lebanon's parliamentary elections. It became the biggest political party in the country. The Shia community loved him. But many hated him too. They accused him of fueling sectarianism and of being an Iranian stooge. But hated or loved, Nasrallah was a towering presence in Lebanon. He was everywhere, on posters, on TV, on the radio, but rarely seen in public. Very few people knew where he lived. He did not venture out, and his speeches were pre-recorded. They were broadcast from a secret location, and all of this gave him an aura of mystique and invincibility. So if he lived such a careful life, how did Israel manage to kill him? Well, the answer is deep intelligence. Reports suggest that Israel had a mole in the Hezbollah. Some say it was an Iranian. He kept an eye on Nasrallah. Apparently, Israel knew of his location for months. So why did they strike now? Because he was planning to move to a different location. Israel feared that he would disappear. They had a small window to act, and they decided to take him out. Most of the Israeli war cabinet approved of this. A few ministers opposed. The plan came together last Monday, and Prime Minister Netanyahu knew about it. But things actually fell into place only on Friday. Nasrallah was in his underground bunker. Israel confirmed the intelligence. Their defense minister and the IDF chief called Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister was in New York at that time. He was just heading to deliver a speech at the United Nations General Assembly. When he was briefed about the intelligence, Netanyahu approved the strike. He then pitched for war at the UN. And less than an hour later, Israel struck Beirut. They hit the Hezbollah headquarters. Hassan Nasrallah was killed. It was a major win for Israel.
The elimination of Nasrallah is a necessary condition in achieving the objectives we have set, returning the residents of the north safely to their homes, and changing the balance of power in the region for years.
The Hezbollah is decapitated. But here's the thing about terror groups. They're Hydra-headed. Killing the chief does not kill the group, and the Hezbollah has suffered a lot in the past 2 weeks. Pager blasts, airstrikes, and then the killing of their leader. They must be in shock. but they still have thousands of fighters. A vast majority of arsenal remains intact.
Hezbollah will continue with its goals and their presence in the field. The command system and the Mujahideen will continue following with your plan, with the same precision and the steps you have drawn up.
Hezbollah says it is ready for war, a war it may not be really prepared to fight. But at this point, it's not their decision to make. Israel is calling the shots. So West Asia is mourning Nasarallah's death. But here's the surprise. So are some people in India. We've seen rallies and protests in Kashmir and Lucknow. Not the small, spontaneous kind. These were big, well-organized processions. Hundreds of protesters / mourners joined in. They carried posters with Nasarallah's face. Take a look at this. To give you some background, Hezbollah is a Shia militant group, and Shias are a minority in Kashmir. They make up just 10% of the population, but they do have certain strongholds. For example, Budgam. It's located around 14 kilometers from Srinagar. And there, such sentiments have always existed, even before the Gaza war. In the Shia quarters, you could see posters of Iran's Ayatollah or Qasem Soleimani or Hassan Nasrallah. There was a sense of Shia solidarity beyond borders. So this outpouring of grief is not surprising. But here's the problem. Supporting Gaza is fine. So is supporting the people of Lebanon. But supporting Hezbollah, that's more complicated. Legally, you can do it. No one can stop you. Hezbollah is not banned or a designated terror group in India. The government of India does not categorize the Hezbollah as terrorists. So you can support them if you want to, but I'm afraid this issue is not just legal. It's also a question of morals and national interest. Hassan Nasrallah had blood on his hands, the blood of innocent civilians. Just consider what happened in July this year. Hezbollah rockets hit a football field in the Golan Heights. They killed 12 innocent children. And it happened on Nasrallah's watch. Should anyone be celebrating such a man? You can question Israel's tactics, you can call out the violations of international law, but it doesn't change a simple fact. Hassan Nasrallah was an evil man. He may have fought for the Shia community, but he slaughtered innocents. And that's the moral problem with celebrating him. Now we come to national interest, because it's not just common people mourning him. Some Indian politicians are doing the same, like Mehbooba Mufti. She leads the People's Democratic Party in Kashmir, the PDP. Plus, she is a former chief minister. And Mufti cancelled her election campaign on Sunday. Do you know why? As a mark of respect for Nasarallah. Now, this was a strange decision to make because Kashmir will be voting tomorrow. It's the last phase of the assembly elections there, and yesterday was the last day of campaigning. Yet Mufti said, I will not hit the campaign trail, that too for Hassan Nasrallah, the same Nasrallah who supported Kashmiri self-determination, who undermined India's sovereignty over Kashmir. Should an Indian politician be celebrating such a man, that too a former chief minister? Surely not. And it's not just Mehbooba Mufti. A lot of candidates cancelled their campaign on Sunday, like Ruhullah Mehdi, a senior National Conference leader. The BJP has criticized these moves. They say the opposition is mourning a terrorist.
हसन नसरुल्लाह का मौत हो गया और आज कश्मीर में महबूबा मुफ्ती बोल रहा है कि हम चुनाव प्रसार नहीं करूंगा, हम दुखी है किस लिए हसन नसरुल्लाह का मौत हो गया है। मैं महबूबा मुफ्ती, फारूक अब्दुल्ला, राहुल गांधी सबको पूछना चाहता हूं, जब हमारे कभी कोई जगह में हिंदू का मर्द होते हैं, आतंकवादी हिंदू जवानों को मारते हैं, तब आप लोग दुखी होते हैं कि नहीं होते हैं, ये कृपा करके हमें बताइए।
Some in Kashmir have been more careful, like former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah. He did not openly mourn or celebrate Nasarallah, but he asked the central government to put pressure on Israel to work towards ending the war. It's important to see all this in a broader context because there is a campaign to globalize the Kashmir issue. Pakistan has been doing it, Turkey has been doing it. Recently, even Iran's supreme leader did it. He clubbed Kashmir with Gaza and Myanmar. In that context, certain red lines must be drawn. First, you cannot back leaders/terrorists who undermine India's sovereignty. That's what Hezbollah has done in the past. They questioned India's rights over Kashmir. And two, you cannot equate Kashmir with Gaza. That comparison is simply not on. But some Kashmiri leaders have hinted at it, like Mehbooba Mufti's daughter, Iltija Mufti. She's making her debut in this election and she talked about atrocities on Muslims in Gaza and Kashmir as if they're comparable. Another example is senior National Conference leader Farooq Abdullah. He said Kashmir could turn into Gaza without India-Pakistan talks. Again, unacceptable. Such statements are coming from senior political leaders. They will influence the next generation. In fact, we're already seeing that. A lot of children were part of these rallies in Kashmir. Look at how they talked about Nasarallah's death.
आपने एक हिजबुल्लाह चीफ को मारा है, हर घर से हिजबुल्लाह निकलेगा। मैं लेबनानियंस को हौसला देना चाहूंगी कि वो बिल्कुल भी फिक्र ना करे, क्योंकि हम उनके साथ हैं। The Shia community उनके साथ है।
Do you think she understands West Asian politics or the nature of Hezbollah or what Hassan Nasrallah stood for? Chances are no, which is why Kashmir's politicians need to set better examples. There is a difference between Muslim solidarity and terror solidarity. I'm afraid this is leaning towards the latter.
The criminal and terrorist Zionist regime with this action has prepared the ground for a harsh punishment.
No one has the right to doubt the legal right of the Islamic Republic of Iran to punish the aggressor.
The Hamas chief is dead, the Hezbollah chief is dead, and both at the hands of Israel, which makes you wonder, what is their godfather up to? I'm talking about Iran. Hassan Nasrallah was probably their most important ally, sort of like the perfect proxy, loyal, powerful and effective. So what is Iran doing to take revenge for his death? Well, so far it's been the usual, rants against Israel and promises of retaliation.
In our opinion, America is a partner in this crime and cannot separate itself from this reality in any way, and the blood of the martyrs of this incident will certainly not go unanswered, and we will definitely stand by Lebanon.
It's like a déjà vu. Think back to late July this year. Israel killed Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and what did Iran do? The very same thing, rants against Israel and promises of retaliation. Well, it's been more than 60 days since Haniyeh's assassination, but Iran is yet to hit back. It says this is restraint, a show of maturity by the so-called rogue regime. Their president talked about it at the United Nations General Assembly. He said Iran does not seek war.
The Islamic Republic of Iran seeks to safeguard its own security, not to create insecurity for others. We want peace for all and seek no war or quarrel with anyone.
If so, they deserve credit. Their leaders have certainly been more responsible than Netanyahu. But let's be honest here. It makes Iran look weak, as if they don't have the stomach for war. And that's a fair argument. You need to check certain boxes before going to war. Your economy must be robust, your allies must be in agreement, and your enemy should ideally be weakened. How many of these boxes can Iran check? Certainly not economy. Their inflation is nearly 50% and joblessness has reached 10% in Iran. Iran's economy cannot bankroll an all-out war. Secondly, allies. The only options are China and Russia. Beijing is not about to fight a war on the other side of Asia. What about Moscow? They're already stuck in Ukraine. Even after Haniyeh's killing, Putin's message was caution. He said, go after Israel, but limit civilian deaths. That's what he told Iran. Will that Putin ever support an all-out war? Highly unlikely, which brings us to the last condition, the enemy's strength. Israel's military is certainly spread thin at the moment, but Iran won't just be fighting Israel. If a war does break out between Iran and Israel, the West will defend Israel. No two ways about it. The White House says it is preparing for all contingencies.
We're watching this very, very closely to see how, if and how, Hezbollah and or Iran may react, as well as the militia groups in Iraq and Syria. We have to be prepared for some sort of response. We have to make sure that we are ready, and we are. We believe we have the force capability we need in the region.
We saw that in April too. Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Israel, but the US and the UK shot them down. Frankly, that seems to be Netanyahu's plan. He's basically setting a trap for Iran, luring them into a direct military face-off. Today, Netanyahu needled Iran further. He addressed the Iranian people directly.
Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Deif. Ask Nasrallah. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different.
If war breaks out, Netanyahu will have a free hand. He can complete his career-long ambition to dismantle Iran's nuclear facilities, which is why Tehran is watching from the sidelines. But do not mistake them for paper tigers. Iran's army is 3 times bigger than Israel's. They have more soldiers, more ships and more rockets. If they want, they can inflict considerable damage. After all, Israel is a small country. But the current circumstances do not work for Iran. Their economy, their domestic political climate, none of it favors them. So Iran would much rather wait for the tide to turn, to strike when it suits them. Again, just one problem here. It's not a good look in geopolitics. 2 of your top allies have been killed by Israel, Haniyeh and Nasrallah. Another ally, the Houthis, are being bombed. So Iran is failing as a godfather. They're looking unreliable and ineffective. So here's Tehran's dilemma. They cannot allow Israel to dismantle their proxy network. At the same time, they don't want all-out war. It's a very delicate balance for them, one that they've not been able to strike so far. But in the long term, expect changes. This war will force Iran to think hard about their nuclear program. It will reinforce their long-held fears. The Iranian president touched upon this issue, and frankly, he made a good point.
They want us not to have missiles, okay, but Israel also needs to be disarmed. If we don't have missiles, they will bomb us whenever they want, just like in Gaza. And if we object, they will tell us to be quiet.
In Iran's mind, the scores have not been settled. Even if the Gaza war ends, it won't be settled because Israel humiliated Iran and Iran has not responded. Unless they do, the scores will not be equal. It makes the coming months very dangerous for the region. Iran's prestige and pride are at stake. Let's see how much longer they can hold off.
Ambulances were seen rushing through streets in southern Lebanon on Sunday, as Israel pressed Hezbollah with more strikes after killing the Iran-backed group's leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah in an escalating military campaign. Israel's attacks have dealt a stunning succession of blows to Hezbollah after almost a year of cross-border fire, killing much of its leadership and revealing gaping security holes. Also Sunday, video posted to social media showed a large fireball and smoke plume above the port city of Hodeidah in Yemen. Israel said it hit targets there in response to missile attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis on Israel in recent days. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, quote, "Our message is clear. For us, no place is too far." White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said all-out war with Hezbollah or Iran would not help residents of northern Israel return to their homes. He said diplomacy remains the right path. In Iran, which helped create Hezbollah in the early 1980s, senior
The United States is embracing Mohammed Yunus. I mean, quite literally. Let's show you some pictures from last week. Joe Biden met Yunus on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly and he gave him a warm hug. This is the same Bangladesh that Biden sanctioned, that he kept out of his democracy summit. So what has changed now? In simple words, the leadership in Dhaka. Washington had a problem with Sheikh Hasina. They accused her of subverting Bangladesh's democracy, of committing human rights violations. But Mohammed Yunus is an old darling. He studied and worked in the United States, even got awards from the US government. The Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2009 and the Congressional Gold Medal in 2010. So it's pretty clear that Washington likes Yunus. Some have even accused the US of orchestrating Hasina's ouster, of installing Yunus as a puppet. We can't be sure of these allegations, but true or not, Yunus did not help his case. He did not just meet Joe Biden, he also met former US President Bill Clinton. Now, Clinton and Yunus have some history. As a governor, Clinton was inspired by Yunus's Grameen Bank. They kept in touch even during his presidency, and that chemistry was on full display.
The whole nation, they mobilized the whole nation together. It's not just the young people. Every single person in Bangladesh support this cause. And I'm very happy at the support in the people of the United States to make that happen. And the sky's the limit. They want to make this Bangladesh called New Bangladesh.
This engagement is quite unusual because the US and Bangladesh have not always hit off. Consider what happened in 1971. Bangladesh was fighting to break away from Pakistan, but Islamabad was America's ally. So what did Washington do? They opposed the liberation war. They tried to stop India from helping Dhaka. In fact, the US did not recognize Bangladesh until 1972, so the relations got off to a bad start and engagements were far and few. Only one US president has ever visited Bangladesh, and that was Bill Clinton in the year 2000. Ironically, Sheikh Hasina was in power back then. That year, she also traveled to Washington. It remains the last bilateral trip from Dhaka to the US. Many leaders have made personal trips since then. They've also attended the UN General Assembly, but even then, meetings were rare. In fact, the last such interaction was in 1990. That's when General Ershad met George H.W. Bush at the United Nations General Assembly. So safe to say, Dhaka was not a priority for the US. Then what has changed now? Well, back then, Washington was focused on beating the Russians. Now they're focused on China. So the Indian Ocean has become prime real estate. Bangladesh has a 580-kilometer coastline. They also have around 150 islands. Washington could use Dhaka to contain China. Is Joe Biden thinking along those lines? Well, Sheikh Hasina says he is. In a leaked speech, she accused Washington of toppling her. She also said that the US wanted to take over a Bangladeshi island, apparently to set up a military base. None of this may ever get proved, but one thing is certainly clear. The United States is thrilled about the churn in Dhaka. Earlier this month, a US delegation traveled to Bangladesh, the first one since Yunus took charge. They promised $200 million in aid. And then came his New York romance. Look at Biden's statement after meeting Yunus. It talks about democracy. It talks about people-to-people ties, and it talks about American support. But guess what it does not talk about? Elections. Yunus is an unelected interim chief, yet Joe Biden did not even prod him to hold elections. Plus, Yunus is cozying up to Washington's old ally, Pakistan. He met Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in New York. Apparently, Yunus wants a reset with Islamabad. All indications are there. This month, Bangladesh marked the death anniversary of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. It's the first time Dhaka marked his death anniversary, Jinnah's death anniversary. Same with Islamists. Yunus recently met the leader of a radical group, Mamunul Haq of the Hifazat-e-Islam. It's a group known for making anti-India statements. So New Delhi will be watching all this closely. Mohammad Yunus keeps saying that he wants strong ties with India, but his actions suggest otherwise. He's warming up to Pakistan, he's hosting radical Islamists and ceding strategic space to America. Let's turn to Pakistan. Last week, Shehbaz Sharif took the stage at the United Nations. His rant on Kashmir grabbed headlines. Sharif compared Kashmir to Palestine. It was an absurd comparison. India responded with a point-by-point rebuttal. And while Sharif's baseless rhetoric got the world's attention, there was another development that flew under the radar. Pakistan secured its 25th IMF bailout. The International Monetary Fund, it has extended a $7 billion package this time to Pakistan, the 25th such package, and it came at a steep price. Islamabad must eliminate 6 ministries, dissolve 6 ministries, and cut 150,000 government jobs as part of cost-cutting measures. Our next report has the details.
India's defence minister has made a candid admission. Rajnath Singh said India could have bailed out Pakistan had Islamabad maintained good ties with New Delhi.
मैंने तो कहा कि मेरे पाकिस्तान के दोस्तों क्यों दूरी बनाकर हमसे रखे क्यों दूरी बनाकर रखे आप हमारे पड़ोसी मुल्क हो यदि हमसे बेहतर रिश्ते बनाकर नहीं रखते आज जो आपको इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड से जो मांगना पड़ा है उससे ज्यादा तो हम दे देते.
Rajnath Singh is referring to this. Pakistan is getting another bailout from the IMF. It's a $7 billion package. This is Pakistan's 25th bailout since independence, and it wasn't easy to secure. The Shehbaz Sharif government has been forced to take some harsh steps and make some deep cuts. 6 government ministries had to be closed. As a result, about 150,000 government positions will be eliminated. Islamabad is trying to put a positive spin to the story. It says government departments are being right-sized, but government workers don't see it that way. They are outraged, especially in Rawalpindi. The local government there has some 42 departments in all. Layoffs are being planned across all of them and at every level. Daily wage workers and contractual employees too won't be spared by these cost-cutting measures. But Pakistan's government has no options. They simply cannot afford them. It has become increasingly difficult for the local administration in Rawalpindi to pay salaries. This is despite the fact that no new recruitment has taken place in the last 7 years. Government employees say there are at least 100 positions lying vacant in every department. Employee unions are now threatening to launch protests. But there's no easy way out for Pakistan's government. It owes a whopping $130 billion to its creditors. Out of this, $90 billion is due over the next 3 years. Pakistan is confident this bailout will be its last. But that promise inspires little confidence. Despite Pakistan's financial crisis, Shehbaz Sharif remains fixated on Kashmir. Last week, he brought it up again at the United Nations. He even compared Jammu and Kashmir to Palestine. India wasted no time in highlighting Pakistan's true state of affairs.
Today, we see the ills it sought to visit on others, consume its own society. It can't blame the world. This is only karma.
No amount of rhetoric can hide Pakistan's crumbling economy and mounting internal challenges. Shehbaz Sharif's message on Kashmir may resonate with certain circles in his country, but Pakistanis would be better served if Sharif takes a long and hard look at the military's budget first.
Now let's shift focus to Africa, to the war-torn nation of Sudan, where the ongoing civil war has led to a diplomatic spat between Sudan's army and the United Arab Emirates. The UAE released a statement today. They condemned the Sudanese army. What for? Attacking the residence of the Emirati ambassador, the UAE ambassador, by an airstrike. Now, to clarify, the ambassador was not home, and this was not some assassination attempt. In fact, Sudan had expelled a number of Emirati diplomats months ago. And even before they were expelled, they had shifted base out of the capital Khartoum to the city of Port Sudan. So the ambassador was not hurt in this attack. But Abu Dhabi is still furious. They say Sudan's army conducted a heinous attack. They said it was a violation of international law of the protected status of diplomatic buildings. The UAE has threatened to raise the issue at the League of Arab States, the African Union, and the United Nations. Meanwhile, the Sudanese army has denied responsibility. It gave a sharp rebuttal to the UAE's charges. Let me in fact quote from the part that is after the denial. The one that carries out these heinous and cowardly actions is the terrorist rebel Dalgo militia, supported in committing all this by a country known to the world, and it continues to carry out these acts under the eyes and ears of countries and international organizations. That was a shot at the UAE and their alleged support for one of the sides in the civil war in Sudan. You see, this civil war has been raging for about a year and a half. On one side, you have the Sudanese armed forces, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the chief of Sudan's military junta and the country's de facto leader. On the other side is a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, led by Mohammed Hamadan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti. That's why the Sudanese army mentioned the rebel Dalgo militia in their statement. They were talking about the RSF. Now, the Sudanese army believes that the RSF, the rebel group, is getting support from the UAE. They've accused Abu Dhabi of funding and arming the paramilitary group. And the UAE has called these allegations baseless and utterly false. But Sudan's army does not believe them. The junta keeps repeating its accusations against the UAE at every international forum, like last week's United Nations General Assembly.
The support from the UAE that you mentioned, we have lots of evidence that proves that there are planes that transport weapons from the UAE to Uganda and then to Chad. This situation was confirmed in the report of the United Nations and was made clear to us through flight tracking. That's why this situation is clear, and everyone knows that is one of the main reasons why the war has continued.
While Burhan was speaking at the UN, his forces launched an assault on Sudan's capital, Khartoum. The RSF has held Khartoum since last year. The group captured it in the early stages of the war, but now the Sudanese army is trying to retake the capital. Major clashes have been taking place over the last 4 days. Both ground assaults and airstrikes are on in various parts of Khartoum. Amid all of this fighting, is it possible that a Sudanese military jet fired a missile elsewhere? The army insists that it did not hit the Emirati ambassador's residence, even though it has both means and motive. We probably won't get a confession out from the junta, and there won't be a proper investigation till the war ends. So both sides will continue to point fingers at each other, and the war in Sudan will drag on. Our next story is from Europe. Austria just held its general election, and for the first time since the Second World War, a far-right party emerged as the winner. Austria's Freedom Party, or the FPO, won the most votes. They did not win an outright majority. They're more than 30 parliamentary seats short of a majority. So there's no guarantee that they will head the next government. But their victory is a sign of the times. The rise of far-right politics all over Europe. Before Austria, there was Germany, with the far-right winning a state election there. Before that, there was France and the Netherlands and Italy. All these parties have one major selling point. They all champion anti-immigration policies, and that is what Europe wants right now. Here's our report.
I am rarely at a loss for words, but today I'm finding it a bit difficult. Yes, and for a very, very positive reason. I can't tell you how happy I am about this result. What we have achieved is beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you for that.
That is Herbert Kickl, the man who led Austria's Freedom Party to its best ever result. The Freedom Party, or FPO, has been around since the 1950s. It was first led by Anton Rheintaler, an agricultural minister in Nazi Germany. The FPO was initially a fringe group, but eventually became a part of Austria's governing coalition in the 1980s and early 2000s, and again in 2017. This election is still considered a watershed moment for the party though, because it has officially become the most popular party in the country. Now there's no guarantee that they will govern. There are 183 seats in Austria's parliament, the halfway mark is 92. The FPO has just 58 seats, so they will need to form a coalition. And every other party has said that it won't ally with the FPO, at least not under Herbert Kickl. Kickl likes to say that he will be a Volkskanzler. That translates to People's Chancellor. Adolf Hitler used to call himself a Volkskanzler as well. So Kickl has sent alarm bells ringing. After his victory, there were anti-Nazi marches in Austria's capital, Vienna. There were signs telling Nazis to get out of parliament. But despite what the protesters feel, hundreds of thousands voted for Austria's Freedom Party. And people all over Europe have started to favor the so-called far right. We saw this in Germany earlier this month, when the Alternative for Germany party came first in the state of Thuringia, and a close second in neighboring Saxony and Brandenburg. During the European Union elections in June, France saw their far-right party emerge victorious. The National Rally Party won the most seats, prompting French President Emmanuel Macron to call snap elections. Last year, you had the Dutch general election, where the far-right Party for Freedom, led by Geert Wilders, came out on top. Wilders wasn't allowed to become prime minister, but his party is the largest in the current ruling coalition. Then there's Italy, the country that arguably started Europe's turn to the right. In 2022, Italy elected Giorgia Meloni as its prime minister, starting the domino effect that you see. All these far-right parties have one thing in common. They all oppose migration. They loathe illegal immigration, but they aren't fans of the legal kind either. They believe that foreigners are taking away resources, taking away jobs, and changing the fundamental makeup of their nations. This anti-immigrant rhetoric has found a lot of takers in Europe, leading to the far-right surge. Along with the anti-immigration stance, most far-right parties are also Eurosceptics, opposing the European Union's interference in their countries. Barring Italy's Meloni, the others all want to stop supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. The Europeans are looking inwards. They don't want immigrants. They don't want pan-Europeanism. It's every country for itself. Basically, back to what Europe was before World War II. So, has the EU experiment failed? And is Europe just revealing its true nature? Fractious, self-serving, and xenophobic to the core.
It takes a village to raise a child, we know it already, but Sweden has taken this proverb and turned it into a policy. This Nordic country is home to about 10 million people and some of the world's most progressive childcare policies. In 1974, Sweden introduced paid paternity leave. This is paid time off from work for fathers of newborn children. Back then, this law was a world first. 50 years later, Sweden has made history again, this time by expanding the policy. Now, even grandparents can get paid time off. Here's how. Swedish parents can officially outsource childcare. They can transfer a portion of their parental leave to other caretakers, mostly grandparents, but other relatives and friends as well. And the child care benefits will expand. They'll apply to caretakers who are not part of the child's immediate family. According to research, this will give families more flexibility. It will incentivize support and help parents balance work with raising a child. Now, this is a trailblazing policy. But then again, Swedish parental policies almost always are. Here, parents get 480 days of paid time off, 480 days. They can split the leave amongst themselves. On average, fathers take 30% of the leave, and this is so normalized that it is taboo for Swedish fathers to skip the leave. But while Sweden has aced maternal, paternal, and extended family leave, most of the world is still struggling with the second step, and that is paternity leave. Swedish fathers take the longest paternity leave in Europe. What about other European countries? Iceland offers 180 days of paid paternity leave. Spain offers 112 days. Netherlands, 42 days. But not every European country is this progressive. Look at the UK. It has the worst paternity leave in the continent. Only 2 weeks of leave. This is paid time off, but the pay is fixed, about $246 a week. It's a bad deal for families with a newborn child. So 1 in 3 fathers in the UK take no paternity leave at all. And 1 in 2 families where fathers do take the leave, they struggle financially. So the British are trying to fight this law. Men are campaigning for a longer and better paternity leave, and they have birthed an unusual movement. They're attaching toy babies in slings to statues across the nation. But look outside Europe and the situation gets even worse. Take the US, for instance. It's among a handful of Western countries that does not guarantee paternity leave. What about Asia? Japan and China are the front runners here with 28 and 14 days of paternity leave respectively. Meanwhile, in India, only government employees get paternity leave of 15 days. There is no law for the leave in the private sector. It is left to the discretion of companies. The same applies to Thailand. And in Russia, fathers get only 5 days of unpaid paternity leave. Basically, across the world, the picture looks bleak, and this is not surprising. Child rearing is still seen as a woman's job. So several countries offer generous maternity leave, but paternity leave is not a priority. Bulgaria, for instance, offers 410 days of paid maternity leave. It's the highest in the world. But what about their paternity leave? Just 15 days. Greece offers 301 days of maternity leave, but 18 days to the fathers, 18 days of paternity leave. And this is the norm. But here's the hard truth. Gender equality cannot appear out of thin air. People need incentives to make it happen. So parental leave is important, not only for mothers, but also fathers, because it is good for babies, the family, and the society as a whole. In countries with 6 or more weeks of paternity leave, the gender pay gap reduces by 4%. And the workforce participation gap reduces by 3.7%. Meaning when parents see childcare as an equal responsibility, and when the dynamic shifts at home, there is positive change both at home and everywhere else.
The death of Nasrallah. The country's interior minister said such assassinations, blind and covert assassinations, will have no result for the survival of this regime. Nasrallah's body was recovered intact from the site of Friday's strike, a medical source and a security source told Reuters on Sunday. Hezbollah has not yet said when his funeral will be held.
Are you going to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu? Have anything to say to him?
Yes, I will be talking to him, and I'll tell you what I say to him when I talk to him.
Yes, sir. Can an all-out war in the Middle East be avoided?
It has to be. We really have to avoid it. We've already taken precautions relative to our embassies and personnel who want to leave, but we're not there yet, but we're working like hell with the French and many others.